The 200 gigabytes plan on Google One is no longer a good deal for me. The storage usage keeps increasing, the price keeps increasing, and there is no plan between 200 gigabyte and 2 terabytes. So I decided to move all my files to my home server. The only thing missing was a file manager with a web interface, which I needed to access my files from my phone. That is where Filebrowser comes in. Filebrowser is a web-based file manager which supports basic file navigations, file operations, file previews, file sharing, authentication, user management, and branding. So in this video, we will explore Filebrowser's features and also we will see how I installed it on NixOS. So let's see how Filebrowsers actually look. The interface provides a list view, a grid view with small thumbnails, and a grid view with large thumbnails. When we double-click a file, we can see the preview of the file. It supports previewing various file types including text, images, PDFs, videos, and audio files. This way we can quickly check the file contents without having to download the file. When we single-click a file, we can see buttons appear at the top of navigation bar. Using these buttons, we can perform common file operations like renaming, copying, moving, and deleting files. File selection is quite flexible. We can select multiple files by pressing Shift or Ctrl keys while clicking on the files, or we can enable multiple selection mode to avoid using the keyboard altogether, which is useful for touchscreen devices. Drag and drop functionality also works seamlessly for moving multiple files to a different directory. File uploads and downloads are of course supported, and it also supports uploading by drag and drop from the system's file browser. For large file uploads, Filebrowser will automatically chunk them into 10 MB parts, and it will also display a progress bar during the upload process. The search functionality helps you locate files quickly with filter available for file name and file type. Some keyboard shortcuts are also available for efficient navigation. If you go to the settings, some customization options are available. You can choose whether to show or hide dot files. You can choose whether to use single click or double click to open files. And you can choose whether to show dates in relative or absolute format. Another thing worth mentioning about Filebrowser is the ability to share files and directories. When you click on a file or directory, you will see a share button that will generate a shareable link. You can set an expiration duration and optionally add password protection. If you set expiration duration to 0, the link will never expire. After you configure the sharing settings, you will get a link that you can share with others. Anyone with this link can download the file without having to log into the Filebrowser interface. So you can just share it with anyone without creating a new user account for that person. All shared links can be managed from the Shared Management tab in Settings, and if needed, you can revoke access before the expiration date. One thing to note is that shared links can only be accessed by users that can access the server. If you configure the server's firewall to open Filebrowser's port, anyone in your home's local network can access the shared links. If you use overlay networks like Telescale or Zero-Tier, anyone connected to the network can access the shared links. If you proxy your home server through a VPS with a public IP address, or if you host Filebrowser on the VPS itself, anyone on the internet can access the shared links. For security reasons, I personally prefer to use Filebrowser only on private network without the sharing features and use Google Drive just for sharing files with others. If I only need to share public files occasionally, the 15 GB free storage is more than enough for me. Now let's talk about authentication. There are 3 authentication options available in Filebrowser: default authentication, proxy header authentication, and no authentication. The default one uses username and password for authenticating users. When Filebrowser is first installed, it will have a default admin user with username admin and password admin. The second option is proxy header authentication. With this option, we will have a proxy between the user and Filebrowser. The proxy will authenticate the user, and Filebrowser will see an HTTP header added by the proxy to identify the user. The third option is no authentication, which means you will immediately see the Filebrowser interface without any login prompt, which is totally fine if it's only accessible from your private network. Although since there is no login screen to identify users, we can't do multi-user setups with this option. Now let's discuss user management. User management is handled through the settings panel when logged in as an admin. On the settings panel, you can create new users, set initial passwords, define scopes, and set permissions. Scope is a root directory that user can access. We can have a multi-user setup by creating a directory for each user and assigning that directory as the scope for that user. This way, from the user's perspective, they will only see their own directory when logged in. While all the files are still visible to the admin, it's still useful to prevent users from seeing other users' files or accidentally modifying or deleting other users' files. Also, I personally disable the allows user to sign up option to prevent the users from creating new accounts by themselves. Another thing I like about Filebrowser is the ability to customize its appearance. We can select a theme, dark, light, or system. We can also set an instance name which will be displayed in the login screen, and we can set a branding directory path which Filebrowser will use to source logos, icons, and custom CSS files. Just remember that the branding directory structure must match the default directory structure, and you might need to clear caches in the browser to see the changes. Now, since we've covered the features of Filebrowser, let's see how to install it on NixOS. I will use name Noodle Drive for the specific Filebrowser instance. Now inside the NixOS configuration file, we'll start by creating a dedicated Linux system user called Noodle Drive and a group with the same name. Please note that this Linux user is different from the Filebrowser users we discussed earlier. After creating the user and group, we'll create a directory to put the stateful files for Filebrowser. We will follow the common practice by placing it in the var lib noodle drive directory. By using option systemd.tempfiles.rules, we can create a directory declaratively with correct permissions and ownership. If somebody accidentally changed the permission or ownership, it will be reset to the correct one on the next reboot. Filebrowser requires a database to store some stateful data, and we will place it in the filebrowser.db file inside Noodle Drive directory. We will also create a storage subdirectory for the actual files and directories managed by Filebrowser. This is the exact directory we will see as the root directory in the web interface. We will set 770 permissions on the directories, which means only Noodle Drive user and group members can access the directories. This means if an interactive user needs to access the directories, we will need to add them to the Noodle Drive group. Now we will create a systemd service configuration for Filebrowser so it will start automatically when the system boots. The service will run as Noodle Drive user and automatically restart on failure. Then we will start the Filebrowser process with the correct port, database path, and root directory. Now after rebuilding NixOS, you should be able to access Filebrowser on the local host using the specified port. To enable access from other machines, we need to open the port in the firewall. Now from the other machine from the same network, you can access Filebrowser using the server's IP address and the specified port. If you want to have multiple instances of Filebrowser, you can just literally copy-paste the configuration and change the name from Noodle Drive to something else. As additional configurations, I've personally enabled cache directories, disabled command execution feature, and set up custom branding. If you are copy-pasting this exact configuration, remember to place your branding directory in the same location as the Nix configuration file. So that was how Filebrowser looks and works and how I installed it on NixOS. Anyway, as always, if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and don't forget to hit the subscribe button. And the name is Nix Hero.